Am I the asshole for giving my Mill a copy of her own house key when she asked to get a copy of mine? My hubby and I recently bought a new home together. His mom started pestering us for a copy of the key in case of an emergency. I told her about the rule we have and that is, only residents get to have a copy of the key. She kept complaining and even got the family involved. Last week, she demanded a copy of the key sent to her. I decided to grab the copy of the key to her house that my husband was keeping for years and sent it to her with a note saying, "Only residents get a copy, so this copy is for the home you reside in." She was beyond livid about it. She told the family and I was called names. Now hubby is complaining about how I escalated and made a mistake by upsetting her further instead of just sticking to "No. Not the asshole. When I read the title I thought you were going to pretend it was the correct key, and see how long it would take for her to try it. Absolutely, she is the asshole for pestering you about this when it is clearly your choice. But yeah, your husband has a point about you stirring the pot. Not the asshole, but I think the stunt made the situation worse. She seems exhausting, but I'm more concerned about why your husband isn't stepping in and telling her to stop asking. Not the asshole. No is a complete sentence. She didn't respect your answer regardless of you telling her repeatedly. She is the A. And so is your husband for not standing up to his mother. Am I the asshole for telling my dad I owe him nothing and throwing his words back at him during an argument? The gist is this. I lost my mom to a long-term health issue when I was 10. The cost of treatment drained my parents' finances and it was just dad and me after mom died. No extended family. Dad started dating when I was 12 and he met Jane. After a few months he told me her son had a form of brain cancer and was very sick and that they were getting married and he would be helping to take care of her son. We went from 2 in a tiny 2-bedroom house to 4 in a tiny 2-bedroom house and me sharing with a terminally ill toddler I didn't know. We had to make so many changes. No more takeout, which was a once-a-month treat before that. I had to stop my only extracurricular activity. No friends over because noise bothered him. No space that was just mine. No extra money for celebrating birthdays and Christmas. When I was 15, Dad and I got into a huge argument because I was never home, and was always saying no to helping Jane take care of her son. When I told him how much I hated the situation, he looked me in the eye and told me to grow up. He also told me that I was old enough to understand that life wasn't always easy or fun and that a rougher life can build character. He told me we grew our family, which was a good thing, and one of the consequences of that sometimes is having less, but that it was worth it for the extra love. I told him that was bullshit. He told me I was not his whole life and he was not going to stop doing what he wanted to do because of me. Then he told me to never, ever say anything negative around his stepson because he was a kid and didn't need to know I resented him for being sick. After that talk I was even more distant and left when I was 17. Right after graduation, and couch surfed until I went to college. I graduated high school at 17 and turned 18 that October. I didn't stay in touch. When I was 19 I heard that Dad's stepson had died. In college I met my wife and we got married this past June. Then in November my dad showed up and told me he wanted to talk. I shut the door in his face. He kept showing up where I was to talk. After getting annoyed with him I agreed to meet him for a coffee. He told me how he'd ended up divorced from Jane and how his stepson had died and he looked disappointed when he learned I knew. He told me how he'd been struggling a lot and how he was hoping I could help him out. I laughed in his face and told him he had some nerve. He mentioned how he'd spent a lot of money on finding me and he wanted us to repair things but he also needed my help. I told him no way. He became angry and told me he was my dad and was always there for me and I owed him. I told him I owed him nothing and I threw most of his words back in his face, including that he needed to grow up and that he was not my whole life and would not stop me doing what I want. It became a bit of a scene. He told me at my age I should have grown more compassion. Am I the asshole? Not the asshole. Your dad sacrificed you so that he could fuck. And as things turned out, the family he created wasn't all that real after all. He was just a patsy to help take care of a sick kid. You owe him nothing. Not the asshole. Your dad quite literally showed up after he had nothing left but you. That's a huge red flag, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Wait, your dad spent money finding you so he could ask you for money? He chose poorly. Not the asshole that old, building character, shtick. What he put you through as a child was really difficult and he essentially told you that you didn't matter anymore to him. He's got no grounds to be surprised now. Where was his compassion for what he did to your childhood when he was doing it? Am I the asshole for not giving my daughter her education fund money? I, 54M, have 2 children, 23F and 21M, with my wife, 52F. When the kids were young, my parents set up education funds for both of them, which was very generous of them. My wife and I always expected our kids to attend college and then graduate school, as we have done. I have a PhD, my wife has a master's. Because of this, we decided not to use the funds for our kids' undergrad degrees and did not tell them about the money. My daughter has always been more into the liberal arts, while my son is more of a STEM guy. My wife and I worried about her ability to find a job, but she insisted on studying music and film in college. She was accepted to some top schools and chose to attend a rather expensive one, but she had scholarships to cover almost all of her tuition. Everything else, plus living expenses, was her responsibility. She lived in a very small apartment shared with friends in a not-so-nice area far from campus, but she was fine and learned how to budget effectively. After graduating, she luckily found a job that doesn't pay extremely well but she enjoys, and scrapped the idea of grad school. My son decided to do engineering, and he also expressed that he had no interest in grad school. My wife and I were disappointed, but accepted it since at this point he is already all set up with a very good job when he completes school. Since he did not receive as many scholarships as his sister, we decided to use his education fund to cover his tuition and living expenses. He was able to get a large and nice apartment of his own close to the school, which is important since his classes are so demanding and he needs a comfortable space to work. My daughter was confused and asked how he could afford this, and he told her about the education fund. She called us and asked why she didn't have one, and we told her she did. We just didn't use it because we hoped she would attend grad school. She seemed hurt by this and asked if there was any way she could have the money now. We explained that there would be a fee to simply withdraw the money for non-education uses, and if we chose to do that it would belong to her grandparents so they could put it towards their own use. She's been quiet and short when answering our texts, and hasn't answered our calls at all since then. I know that it seems unfair to her, but it's not really her money in the first place and she's no longer in college. Plus, her brother only received it for educational purposes and it wouldn't be right for her to just have it to spend now. Am I the asshole? Update. I understand the consensus is that my wife and I are the I texted my daughter to ask if she wanted us to withdraw the money for her, what she wanted to do. This was her response. I don't care. Maybe they can transfer it to other grandkid who is 5, if the fee is seriously too much. IDK about grad school. I haven't thought about it much recently. If I do apply it wouldn't be for another couple years and I hadn't been counting on having any financial help in the first place so it really doesn't even matter. Thanks for asking though. Update 2. My wife and I are discussing our daughter's response and our next actions to resolve this situation. For context, my wife has always had a strained relationship with my daughter and did not approve of many of her life choices. She believes we should take our daughter's words at face value and assume she no longer wants the money. From some of the responses here, I fear that my daughter's response was out of resentment and I suggested taking out as much money as her brother was given so at least they received the same amount. She could use it responsibly towards rent, groceries, transportation, etc. or in some other way to further her career, so it would still be for educational purposes in a sense. My wife is standing firm in her opinion, and we will continue talking it through tomorrow. Many have asked about where my parents stand on this. At this point, they are not mentally aware enough to really participate in the discussion. They did know about our grad school stipulation and thought it was fine. They also knew that we took out some money for our son once we were certain he was not pursuing an advanced degree, and were fine with that as well. They said it was our decision as parents what to do with our daughter's fund, and they would support whatever we decided for her. It wouldn't be useful to ask them what to do with it now, but I have always said that whatever is unused will go back to their care. I have tried to call my daughter with no luck, which is why I sent the text. Despite what many have said here, I hope this does not end our relationship. You are the asshole and I am surprised between your PhD and master's degrees you couldn't figure that out. You are the asshole. Oh dear, just goes to show you that having PhD and a master's does neither make you a good parent or smart in any way. So let me get this right, your daughter attended college and had a scholarship. Your son attended college with no scholarship. You chose to not let your daughter use her college fund for everything that her scholarship didn't cover and you let your son use his for everything. The college fund, you said, wasn't even her money, but isn't yours either. What exactly do you plan to do with her college money? You are the asshole for this. You paid for your son to have a large apartment to himself close to his school but forced your daughter to pay for her own shitty appartement across town? Obvious asshole. Am I the asshole for forgetting to lock the door a few times a month? Hi Reddit. Boy, I was hoping never to have an issue to put here, but I really need some perspective on this one. I come from a family that only sometimes locked our doors, so it was never really ingrained in me to keep the door locked at all times. My wife, on the other hand, came from a family where the norm was to lock everything, get a camera, be suspicious of everyone coming to the door, just hyper concerned about safety in all ways. As a result, in the beginning of our relationship, I rarely locked our doors and she always did. It gave her a lot of anxiety, especially since we were living in a rough neighborhood at the time. Since then, I have done my best to keep up with locking the doors. We have since moved to a great apartment in a very safe neighborhood. And though I'm a forgetful person, I have been remembering I lock our door about 8-9 times out of 10. Still working on it though. Unfortunately, my wife's anxiety about our safety has just been getting worse. She says she has night terrors and can't handle worrying if the door is locked. It's awful that she feels this way and I want to help her out. I'm just struggling to see and understand why this situation is provoking such a huge emotional response. Extra info. My wife and I live in a newly developed, gated community on the 3rd floor of our apartment building in the very back. Zero crime since we have been living here. I take out the dogs every night, so I am the one locking the door. We have a new puppy that needs to go out every 4 hours, and it's the 4 a.m. walks where I am most likely to forget to lock the door, 8/10, versus regularly, 9+10. My wife is very upset at me and has told me she is going to buy an expensive camera and another device and leave notes everywhere for me to lock the door. 8th for causing this situation? You are the asshole. Just lock the fucking door, dude. Putting notes up as a reminder sounds like a good idea, if it gives your wife peace of mind and it ensures you lock the door. You are the asshole. Bad things still happen in safe, gated neighborhoods and, bottom line, it's super important to your wife. It doesn't take much effort to make sure you lock the freaking door. She's not being unreasonable with that very basic request. You going on about her being hyper-suspicious and anxiety-driven with her request is borderline gaslighting. Stop being an asshole by trying to make her seem overly emotional or unreasonable and just lock the door.